Frank Lamb, and this is a Mastering the Machine Zoom webinar for April 16th, 2021. This was a virtual open house for my company, Automation Consulting, LLC. And we talked about the Automation Academy and had a few guests. It was a very good meeting. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, again, Kelly. Kelly is a programmer, integrator guy from my area. Vlad has a very cool PLC site. So he does PLC training and some integration and that kind of stuff too, programming. So we're all a bunch of geeks together. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start the actual presentation, kind of show what I'm up to and a little bit of my funky history. And the reason that I'm doing this partially is just to kind of encapsulate all the stuff that I'm involved with so other people can come back and look at it later. And this does include a little different content than some of the stuff I've done before. But Vlad, for instance, he was a guest on a whole webinar just a couple weeks ago. And then Phil was actually my first guest on the very first webinar I had. So that's kind of a cool thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, show you some of the stuff I'm doing. And I did one of these geeky PowerPoint things. There we go, share. So this showed up. I can still see you guys over here. So that's cool. So this is the same little webinar screen. Hopefully everybody can see that, right?
Yeah.
So that's my little splash screen. I usually do that. But this time I've had guests on every one of these webinars until this one. And I am the guest. I'm guesting myself. So the original automation consulting system, services, before I even met Kelly, which is the oldest contact I've had on here. Kelly and I worked together at Wright starting in 2006. Long time ago, yeah. So I founded that company literally in my garage in 2006, in 1996, right? And it was what we call a controls house. And I think a lot of you guys probably know what a controls house is. I started out building control panels, and I had done some PLC programming, but I could get those physical jobs quicker than I could get programming jobs. So I kind of started doing that. And this one, I don't think I built in my garage. I actually made the mistake of opening a physical shop early on, which was a mistake. If I had it to do again, I would not have gone and rented an office, right? It's better to stay in your garage as long as you can. That's usually a better practice. So I evolved into becoming a machine builder. And the reason is, right, I met this other guy who had started a company at the same time as I did within 2 months. And his name was Tom Nall, and he's kind of my mentor. He built custom packaging machines at first, but as soon as he figured out that I could program things that he didn't know anything about, like gauging machines and vision systems and things like that, he started going out and selling like automotive jobs, even though he was mostly a packaging machine guy. So I hired a bunch of guys. That's one of them. He still works for NAS. And he, my guys would wire their machines and we'd build their control panels and I'd program their machines. And that's kind of how we evolved. And so they built all their stuff out of extrusion, and you'd be surprised how big of a machine you can build out of extrusion, right? We think of it as guarding, but like these machines were 20, 30 feet long out of the 4x4 extrusion, and you could build some huge stuff. So I learned a lot of stuff about extrusion from him, right? Cool stuff. Then I started building my own machines. In 2002, 2003, he decided all I'm going to do is custom or standard packaging machines. I'm tired of the custom stuff. So I started picking up on the custom stuff, gauging, built a transmission tester with a welded frame here. Came up with this idea. I come up with these dumb, inventions, I guess, and I try to promote them. And I've realized just how hard that is. This sucker here cost me probably $50,000 or $60,000 to prototype, and I thought it was a great idea. And I had a very good customer in mind, but I never sold any of these things. They were about 6 feet tall and 7 feet deep. And, the idea was it was kind of like these tooling bases that people make now. And it was for manually building things and checking all the things that you built. And it was not particularly successful, right? So I built it, and I actually had this thing until the big tornado that happened last year. So,
oh, it got it.
It got it, man. Well, it didn't exactly get it, but what I'll have to tell you that story when I get to this page. So then I went to Wright, and Kelly here is an ex-Wright Industries employee, as almost all the integrators in this area are. It's interesting. I know a lot of people here, and I can't tell whether any of the other ones are on here. Let me see. See if I can see who's on here. It still just shows us. So other people may pop in and out. But in any case, a lot of the guys that got their start around here have worked for the same companies, right, in Middle Tennessee. And we're kind of a hotbed of integration here. And the reason is lots of automotive companies, lots of big machine builders, custom machine builders, right, of which Wright was one of them. And Kelly has since moved on. He left Wright before I did. But this was one of the projects I did. I think Kelly was probably still there. When did you leave, Kelly?
Oh, man. I'd have to look at my resume. I don't even remember now.
2007 or 8. Yeah, I think you were on an Abbott job or something. I don't remember. Or Eli Lilly.
Yeah. I went to work at HPC, and they lasted about 3 years and went out of business.
Oh, yeah. That's
they were in business like 40 years.
Another cool story, yeah. So yeah. I got involved in this, and I think this happened after Kelly. I joke, if I tell you about it, I'll have to kill you. We did government jobs sometimes, and I was always told, don't show any pictures and everything, but then they released all these pictures online on websites, and they showed people processing the munitions, and that's what this was. It was the part of the START treaty where they would take gas, nerve gas munitions, and they would disassemble them. We had an agreement with the Russians that we have to take apart all of our munitions and everything. And so that got to be one of my projects. They had one earlier on, and then I got to do the production PCAP project, which was cool. Then ZF steering, which was kind of a nightmare. This was all Siemens, and the only reason I got this job is there were only 2 of us at Wright Industries that could program Siemens. Me and John Bakanowski, which Mr. Kelly knows very well. John was a great guy, very smart guy. So now Wright Industries is owned by JR Automation. They were bought, and then JR Automation was bought by Hitachi. So it's funny how these custom machine builders kind of move around. 2012, I left, and I actually gave my notice a year before I left Wright Industries. And Mr. Craig Farnbach would not take my resignation quite yet. He kept saying, well, you need to finish this, or can you work on this, or we want to get you involved in this. And finally, by the end of 2011, I said, December really is my last month here. And I'm going to Central America because I'm 51 or 52 years old, and I'm crazy, and I'm gonna go backpack Central America. It was kind of a crazy thing, and I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I got done. But meanwhile, I had started this blog, and Doug Allward, one of our contacts who's been on the Automation Academy shows here, took over my blog for a month and actually posted some of his stories, which are really cool. I didn't realize he'd written a book about machine building, some history stuff, which was cool. So he took that blog over while I was in Central America, and I kind of put pictures on there and things. And I said, well, when I get back, I'm going to start contracting. At about that same time, I had started writing this book, and this book was a lot about the contents of this automation primer. So this was my first attempt at the online stuff, right? Which Vlad's been doing for a long time, even longer than I have. And he's younger than I am. So anyway, I got this book published mostly due to my daughter. She pitched it to McGraw-Hill. She said, have you pitched it to any publishers? And I said, one, and I didn't have a lot of good response. So I kind of gave up on it. And she said, well, I'm going to pitch it, if you don't mind, to McGraw-Hill. She pitched it, and it got picked up, and that was pretty cool. So I got back from Central America, and I started contracting to Automation NTH. And this is another one that Kelly is familiar with. They were pretty small at that time, and they had employed my wife, who was a panel builder there. And I realized, and I think Kelly has also contracted to automation NTH or maybe even work there. So this was a
contracted for a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a place that people, integrators can come in and pick up jobs. You're not going to make a ton because they have to sell your services. So you got to give them a price, and then they mark up your price, right? So it's hard to do if you want to make any money. So most people kind of go independent at some point. But I contracted to them 2012, 2013. I got to work on lots of fun stuff, and Kelly probably recognized these because these three are at Mid-South, and Kelly and I both contracted to Mid-South at the same time in 2013. So we got to work on these fun machines. The fun thing about this is they build the machine ahead of time, and then they turn it over to you, and they have no idea what the controls are going to look like. They just say, here's the machine, go program it, which is very unusual. That is not the way that you would normally do programming, but that's what they do. They're just this kind of odd machine builder that's what they do. They don't have a lot of their own controls guys, so they go hire people from other places.
I think I took that picture of you with your book.
Yes, you did. And as a matter of fact, I skinned my head. Look, I really do have hair now, but in that picture, I skinned my head. I
forgot about that.
Yeah. So and I did it for, I don't know, maybe 2 months. And I realized, number one, it's really hard to skin your head over and over again every day. And you have to, or else it gets little spots on it. It looks funny. And the other thing is, of course, my head was really white. So I really do regret this. It made me look pretty strange. This was, This was up at Havana. Havana, I got to work on a system that had about 15 machines in it. Yeah.
I used to work there.
Yeah, that was a cool job. American Axle, NTH contracted me to Havana, went up there with Glenn Stribling and some other people, and there were like, I don't know, 10 engineers, and all these machines are connected together, and we can all go online with everything. It was a pretty fun experience.
I worked there for a total of 15 years.
Did you really?
Yeah, I started out as an apprentice toolmaker, got my apprenticeship, asked them for a raise. They said no, so I left for about 1.5 years, and I called them because I didn't like where I was working, and they said, yeah, we're busy, and I told them what I wanted. It was more than what I wanted when I left, but my condition was I wanted to get into controls, and that's how I got into controls.
Very cool, man.
So I worked 10 more years.
Yeah.
There.
Wow.
They did a lot of work.
They did, and they grew, and they were bought out by Phillips something or other. I don't know who.
They were, and they've gotten purchased again.
Oh, really?
Havana isn't even on the building anymore, I don't think.
So Havana, I think, was short for like, it's in Evansville. So Havana, Evansville. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of cool. So this is kind of how I got into machine building. And this is sort of, probably Kelly can explain how he got into it too. This is if you're a controls engineer, this is like, to me, the coolest thing you can do is work on custom machines and finish them, man. And you get them from the very beginning, and designing them was fun too. So, I do a lot of mechanical stuff. I don't know how much of that any of you guys do, but I get to do quite a bit of mechanical design. And then I met this company in 2013. So Automation Training, I had actually talked to them when I was still at Wright, because I thought, I might like to teach PLC programming. Teaching sounds like it's, fun and easy. That's kind of the way I looked at it. And I'd written that book, and so I kind of thought, that might be fun. So this was my first class. They sent me to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was the only one they had ever used that did not go up to Canada and teach for them, right, in person. And so they kind of just cut me loose, and they figured, well, this guy's been programming for a long time. He ought to be able to teach a class. And so I went out to Raleigh, and I just met this equipment. They shipped these suitcases out. So you can see there's a suitcase. This was before I fully set it up. And they'd have you set up the suitcases, connect the laptops to them, and people show up, right, from all kind of different companies, and you have a 4-day class. Basically all classes are 3 or 4 days, and then you pack everything up, put it in boxes, and send it back to Canada or to the next class or whatever. So this is a neat thing to do. Vlad, if you ever thought about doing this, Automation Training is a good company to do that for. You're not going to make a ton of money. That's the bad news. They pay you hourly, and then it's purely the number of hours you work. They pay you a little bit of travel money, But they do, of course, reimburse you quickly and pay for your plane ticket and your travel and all that kind of stuff. So this was really, I enjoyed the heck out of this. And by 2014, this was over 50% of my business. This was what I was doing most of the time. That's why I disappeared from Mid-South, right, and contracting to NTH. I actually made a little more probably contracting to NTH, and then I started picking up my own jobs. And I actually met them through automation training, right? American Beverage Depot had called one of the instructors, and they said, "Can you come down here to Florida and troubleshoot our equipment?" And of course, he was a Canadian citizen, and he worked full time for automation training. So he said, "No, I can't do that." But hey, we got this new instructor in Nashville, Tennessee, who maybe can come down and help you. And I did. I crawled around under these tanks, and I troubleshot their device net. This is old school stuff, a 505 with device net. And all this stuff was a 505. And it was the fullest 505 I ever seen. It was running their entire syrup processing system. And it got pretty crazy, right? So I'd go in there periodically. I'd go for a week or 2 weeks and started doing my own contracting. And the nice thing was I could make up my own price and they'd pay it. But it was a little bit odd because there were only like 3 people that spoke English. And I hadn't met the plant owner yet. I'd met the engineering manager and the plant manager and the maintenance supervisor, and they spoke a little bit of English, but very little, right? So I hadn't even met the owner yet. But anyway, during this time, these were the jobs that I did, right? So training, all this is the classes that automation training sent me to. It was very fun. I really like to travel. It's not always fun, right? Sometimes they send you places that, are not like this class. This was in Warrenton, Missouri, and there was nothing there. There was just really bad food. And some places that you go to aren't that fun, but some places like Boston or, I don't know, Philadelphia, things like that, you get to see things. Tesla, right? I did 5 or 6 classes for Tesla. That was cool. So I got to know the guys in the Gigafactory and taught them Siemens. They already knew Control Logics and everything, but taught them a lot of Siemens stuff. Other fun places. Some places that you would think would not be fun. This is Canadian Texas, and it's oil and gas. So a lot of my Oklahoma or Dallas or Houston classes, I learned a lot about the oil and gas industry, right? Because I'd talk to the guys and I'd learn from them. So in addition to teaching, I'm learning, right? And sometimes this is all process control down here. So I put the little blue thing because that's where I go back and constantly go to ABD. This is a stone saw manufacturer. I did a lot of his original controls design on his stone saws. So you get to learn stuff as you're doing all this. So I traveled like crazy. The bad news is in 2015 or 2016, I did 38 weeks away from home. And it was airplanes and it was driving and it was just kind of a lot of crazy stuff. So got tired of that and decided to open my own little place. I said, if I build a little, shop, maybe I can bring people and have my own classes. So that's when I did this. And in 2016, I rented this office, and this was before I even got tables in there, and it kind of evolved. So eventually I got this big training table. I could do up to 8 people in here in person, got a, projector screen, things like that. And I built this funky factory. So, I had always built machines in the past. I built this thing out of extrusion, you can tell, but I had to machine a lot of little parts. I have a little mill and some stuff in my garage. So I got to build this thing up. It took me, probably a year and a half to build it. But the side effect of it was Automation NTH, who I had contracted to, started sending their interns over there. They have a program called NTH University, and they said, we can't hire people like Kelly Slow. We can't hire enough of them, right? They don't want to come work here. They're all doing their own thing. And so we want to start taking interns from MTSU and Tennessee Tech and training them ourselves. And that is a good idea. It's the best way to get your own engineers. They're not expecting a high salary yet, right? They're straight out of school. You're teaching them, and I just got a message from somebody. I don't know if they're trying to log in here, but in any case, so I started teaching them at their facility or at my facility, and they would send 1 or 2 guys out to work on this factory at a time, or I would teach them at the tables, right? And I would do basic PLC training. They also started bringing some of their pharmaceutical customers that needed training in. That's what this is. So they do a basic class with a, it'd be HMI programming, a little bit of vision systems, and this little conveyor. And they'd send guys like project managers in here and guys that weren't all that technical. And they would learn how to, a little bit of programming, and they just spend a week doing intensive stuff. You can't tell this. I don't know if you saw this when you were there, Kelly, but this is 10 different kinds of PLCs on a big board. There's Modicon, there's all kinds of things, and their interns would each get a different brand. So they'd get anything, even Arduino and Raspberry Pi, and they would have to do a semester project as an intern at NTH. So during this time, they started developing this thing called NTH University. Jeff Buck was one of the guests on one of these webinars too. He kind of talked about what his company does. But I think when Kelly worked there for a little bit and contracted, they were, I don't know, 20, 30 people. They're up to like 90 now. And they're actually starting some low-end machine building. So they're doing some kind of cool stuff. Meanwhile, ABD evolved, right? So they started doing ignition. I did meet the plant owner. He's been a guest on here twice, right? So he's actually been on these webinars. He's only in his early 30s. When I met him, he was 27, but he's an owner. Which is pretty cool. And he started doing ignition. So he wants to automate the entire plant to the point where literally he can move to somewhere like San Francisco and run his plant remotely and not have to be there. And along the way, we did things like I can log into his server and go online with any of the PLCs in his plant. There are cameras everywhere, so I can kind of see what's going on. Now, you got to be careful when you're programming a machine online from 1,000 miles away. Obviously, there's only certain things you can do, right? So some things I have to go down there, and I still do that. I get my travel even during pandemic year. I've been able to go down there and work on stuff. They have every kind of a machine you can imagine, which is cool. Packaging machines, process machines. That's a big bottle blower right here. Siemens 400, runs really fast and blows bottles, and learned about giant compressors and all kind of things. So learning is a big part of this too. And during that time, published another book. That was cool. PLC programming book. This is done really well. It's done better than the McGraw-Hill book is doing. And got into some crazy stuff, started designing these little trainers, and I thought I was going to sell them. I actually put them for sale online. They were kind of unique in that it evolved into an enclosure you can build yourself, right? I thought that was cool. It's a kit, right? And you can buy all the individual components, and it ships to you flat, and then you can take all the things and build your own box. So the thing behind me right there, if you can see my little picture here, that is one of them. And I use them for myself mostly right now rather than selling them. Because selling things is really hard. Shipping things is really hard. It takes time out of your day. Advertising things is really hard. So I've kind of given up on that whole concept. I am actually a distributor for this now. I get these at about 75% of their list. And I liked the idea of selling these little toys to, junior colleges and universities and things, and selling the trainers. This little cable hooks right into this. And I did some videos on it, did all kind of things. Thought that this was going to be a big part of my business, physical products and PLC training in my facility, right? I thought this was what it was going to be. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. This place was 1.5 miles from my house. Thought it was a cool concept. But guess what happened? 2020 happened. Okay, so a lot of people know what happened in 2020 as far as the pandemic. People around Nashville know that a tornado came through, and it was dead center on the path of my office, my fun office with all the cool little toys in it. And Kelly, it did not totally destroy the smart. That's right, Kelly, you were the one who helped me, I think, unload that thing from a truck. Yes, I shipped it out from.
Killed yourself doing it by yourself.
Yes. So I did shrink it. I made it smaller. I took apart a lot of the stuff, and it was freestanding, and I could actually put it on a dolly and bring it to my car. So I did shrink it somewhat, but a lot of the stuff you saw here was the smart bench. This extrusion were pieces of the smart bench.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened to part of it, right? I used a lot of the extrusion, repurposed it, and shrunk it. So that tornado happened, and all during this time, all of a sudden the pandemic happens, and instead of teaching in person, and instead of people feeding me classes, automation training even kind of died. I've done 3 classes for them this year. So I can't travel as much. They don't send me places. I can't necessarily bring people into my own place, and I didn't have a place to do it anymore. So I worked for 4 months out of my house. The problem with my house is I have really terrible internet. So very slow streaming. We're like kind of DSL through AT&T. So I had to get into a new place. So what I did is I bought a little house. And this little house is by the Lebanon airport. And that's kind of the inside of it. There's my wife standing there and the realtors. And I actually did get a few students. Guys from this area, and I'd get 1 and 2 students at a time, and they'd come in and in person take classes. But I thought, you know what? I need to do something online, clearly, right? That's going to be the wave of the future during pandemic time, if you want to call it that. So I came up with this idea, and I thought at first, Vlad, that I was going to teach PLC classes. I thought I was going to create PLC videos. Now, Vlad's been doing this for a long time. Vlad can tell you it takes a tremendous amount of time to make the videos and make them professionally. And I made my first video maybe a year and a half ago. And I kind of did it to test the waters before the tornado and everything. And I did it for NTH. NTH actually paid me to create a video for them, right? For some of their customers and things. And so they kind of funded it. But I realized when I did it, it was about 1 hour for every minute of finished video. So I don't have time for that, right? I'm busy doing all this other crazy stuff and doing little demos. And so things have evolved. I have created a lot of videos, but they're not training videos like Vlad's training videos. They are, I start a project and I wing it, and I keep adding modules to it, and I get more and more advanced, and I start simulating stuff, and I start doing simulated part tracking and, building big UDTs with a bunch of stuff in them, or do process control, and I simulate that, and I just build this big project. So it's not a typical PLC class. Now, Phil, I don't know if you've taken any of the classes in there, the Odyssey classes, but there's a bunch of them right inside, and they're just continuous, just Frank sitting down for an hour and creating stuff. Have you gone through any of those?
I haven't taken the Odyssey classes yet, but I'll check them out. I've been trying to get up on my ignition training lately, so I've been spending a lot of time doing that.
So interestingly, and I mentioned that at the end, there's another company that does very much what Ignition does, and they're called Tatsoft. I don't know if you know anything about them. Mm-hmm. Tatsoft is about, I would say, roughly half the price of Ignition. So that's one advantage. It's less expensive. The other thing is it's .NET based instead of Java based. So some people would rather work more in that environment, and they seem to have more, like one of the things they advertise that they push, they say they have something called an MQTT broker, which a lot of the MQTT stuff now is on the low end. I think for industry 4.0 things, you can get these little Arduino widgets or whatever and hang things out there. And so it seems to be maybe more amenable to that kind of stuff. So that's an interesting thing that's happening too, is I've kind of connected with Tatsoft. They're my guest in mid-March. So they're my next guest. You may want to sit in on that one. I'm actually having their marketing guy and I think the president of the company's coming, and a bunch of people. So that's cool.
It's going to be excellent. I've read, sorry to interrupt. I've read really good things about them. I just haven't seen, because they're very technically involved, but I think their marketing is still not fully out there. So people are just not as aware of their platform as they are of Ignition. But I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm certainly interested in their platform.
Yeah, it is, because, and so at ABD, of course, they're all Ignition, but recently they realized they had to upgrade their license. They had to buy the new license to do the mobile device development. Upgrading his license for Juan Pablo is $23,000. That's a lot, right?
That's a lot.
That's like, it's almost what it's more than what he paid, I think, for the original package. So Tatsoft, I think, maybe starts at 10,000, 11,000, and it already has the mobile stuff, and he can develop it in .NET. But the thing is, he would have a learning curve that he would have to learn all the Tatsoft stuff instead of the Ignition, and they don't quite have the university yet that Ignition, inductive university is pretty complex and detailed, and all you want to know about it. Yeah, you can become an integrator just doing their online
Ignition
stuff. Oh, Ignition is SCADA. It's like
okay.
Factory Talk View, but better. A lot better. Way better than Wonderware. It does more, and it's a lot more intuitive. It's literally drag and drop. More drag and drop than Allen Bradley is, even though Allen Bradley is somewhat drag and drop. But and it's independent. That's, I think, the biggest advantage is it's not made by Allen Bradley or Siemens. But it's Java based and has lots and lots of tools in it. So that's what Juan Pablo's done at ABD. So that's why I put ABD up here, because I still work with them a lot, right? I've been there twice this year and at the end of last year, and he's been a guest, like I said, on the webinar. We go through the plant and we show what they're doing. So that's kind of cool. So then I came up with this Automation Academy idea. And originally I thought, oh, I'm going to create PLC programming classes. That's going to be my thing. Well, reality is, like I said, it takes too long to do that. So I still only have one true PLC course that explains from the very basics to the very advanced, right? So I did create this. This is a basic ladder logic thing, but again, I sort of wing it. I covered just the very basics generically out of my book. I did an Omron class because I was going to teach an Omron class. So that's an Odyssey class, which means all I do is start a program and talk like I'm talking now and show people the screens and say, this is how you program Omron. It's not a formal class. It doesn't have lots of good graphics and moving arrows like my other stuff does. But I've done TIA Portal. I've done Studio 5000. I've done Factory Talk View. What else? This thing. So this is new, and that a lot of what I'm doing here, this Mastering the Machine, is this. And the reason I did this is because I realized after the Automation Academy was released, which the Automation Academy, by the way, is a membership site. People can join for a month or 2 months or whatever. But I realized after people joined, a lot of the people were coming to me and saying, we're not really here for your PLC classes. There's a million people creating PLC classes, and some of them are free. If I can go to YouTube and I can take free RS Logix 500 classes. Now, I will tell you the ones on YouTube are not very good. So if you're trying to learn your stuff for free on YouTube, good luck, right? I would recommend strongly that you go to somebody like Vlad and take a professional course if that's your goal, right? If you want to learn all the details about it, Vlad will take care of you, and he has lots and lots of modules, and they're professional. The guys on YouTube, well, if they were that good, they'd be charging for them, right? So, anyway, I do these, but I realized pretty quickly that this is not necessarily why people are there. Part of why people are there, they don't even realize it yet, is this, right? Which I give some career advice stuff and how to figure out what you want to do in life, not just for your career, but in general. And I have a lot of stuff in there for that. I have a software and document library. There's some forums and groups that actually not a lot of people take advantage of. And then I have these webinars every 2 weeks. So since November, I've done these every 2 weeks. I've almost always had a guest on it. Here's what's this has evolved into. This is a crazy thing. This guy was my webinar guest March 5th. He paid me for a class. He came to my facility and took the classes in person. And when I first talked to him, he said, I need a PLC class, right? Like everybody else does. We quickly realized the PLC is not your problem on this project. He knew nothing about electricity. he wanted to build everything himself, and he did not know electricity yet. So fortunately, this is a really smart guy. He was not a controls guy. He's not an engineer. He's actually a law student at Belmont. Okay, and imagine that. But he's the VP of a company, and he's really smart. And so he built this panel from scratch himself. He programmed the PLC in this panel. He designed everything. Right.
If I may add, like, he did the drawings, he did the layout, he selected the parts. Like, I think there was a lot that goes into it. I was very impressed by what he did in such a short amount of time.
And he only took 4 in-person day classes, and then the rest of it was all we did some phone stuff, and I charged him hourly here and there. It was a blast. So he's a member. One of the things that happened was he quickly joined because, for instance, the software for his HMI, which is this, is free on my site. I tell people that instead of buying even a Seymour, right? This thing behind me over in one of my demos is a WineView PLC, WineView HMI. American Beverage Depot, they have gone to entirely WineView HMIs. They have 100 of them in their plant. Why did they go to WineView? Software is free. It does everything that RSView does, or not RSView, but Factory Talk View, right? It does everything that WinCC does, and the HMI starts at about $200. $200, right? So we think that the cheap HMI is Automation Direct Seymour or something like that. It's $700 for a 6-inch touchscreen, color. This is $200 and some dollars. And like I said, the software is free. So he downloaded the software. We did a little bit of this. He drew this stuff himself. That's his, right? The dust handling system. He designed all this. He built it. He started it up. So he's up. He's probably done by now. He sent me these pictures yesterday. I said, hey, you got any pictures of your stuff? And this is it, right? Pretty cool stuff. So what did he get out of this? He got systems integration. We spent very little time on the PLC programming. The PLC program is a continuous process. It just runs a giant 100 horsepower drive fan. It has a bunch of blowers that blow out filters, and it's got a conveyor and an airlock, and that's it. It's not all that complicated. There was a lot of safety, you know, like for instance, you hit this e-stop. Yeah, there's a dual channel e-stop system here that just drops the power to the drives and issues a stop command. Has giant braking resistors. You can see them here on the sides. And it just stops the fan in a hurry. So we didn't need like safety for people. We needed safety for equipment, you know, and I had a lot to explain about safety systems. Hey, you're either protecting people or you're protecting your equipment. In this case, if it catches on fire or if something inside catches on fire, how do you want to stop your system? Right? Why do we use dual channel stuff? Which when Kelly and I started this stuff, it was not dual channel. We used giant PK relays and it was single channel. There was no such thing as dual channel, right? We're old guys. I think Kelly's a little younger than I am, but not much. But we go back to the single channel stages. Yeah. So anyway, look at that beautiful system. And he was my student starting in January. So he's done all this since January. My next student, Dr. Z, and I'm not going to give his full name, but he's a member at the Automation Academy. So you can see his more full name in the Automation Academy. What did he do? He bought a universal robot. He bought a conveyor, and he's getting some equipment in that has a 1500, a Siemens TI Portal 1500 on it. And again, he said, I just need a PLC class. No. You know, you need all the stuff that Lucas needed. If you're not a controls integrator, you need a lot of stuff to make this thing work. So I've only had one meeting with him, right? And he's bought a couple days of training, and we've had one meeting in April, right? This month, we've been talking about that. So this is evolving. And then my third student, this is even more interesting, Sam. And Sam's a member of the Automation Academy, right? So what I'm seeing is a kind of a trend here. People join the Automation Academy to learn systems integration. This one truly is systems integration. He is the owner of a pet food supplement company, and he has people manually filling containers and putting them in boxes right now. and he is selling a whole lot of his product, and you just can't fill containers with human beings at a filler. They take this filler and they, you know, fill the container with it, and they put a cap on it and put it in a box and ship it. That's not economical, right? He needs to move that plant to Mexico, or he needs to automate everything. The odd part about this guy is he's really into robots. So we've had our first meeting, and he showed me this is actually a little like one of those little Japanese robots with a face on it, right? And Asimo or whatever. And so he's got a bunch of little robots, and then he has these robots, and these actually will show a face on the robot thing as it's packing stuff. So he's got a Baxter, and he's got a Sawyer, which is all made by this same company. And then he's got conveyors, and he's got this, and he owns 3 different brands of PLCs, and he hired a guy, and he did a little automation for him. That didn't work out, so he's decided, I'm going to do it all myself. Well, I don't know how many classes he's going to need to take. He's doing something a lot more complicated than what Lucas is doing, right? So who knows what this is going to turn into. But this is another new student. We've had one meeting. So the website, what I've been putting on there is, yeah, basic PLCs, all this PLC stuff. That was originally what I thought it was going to be. But then I started putting electrical design stuff on there, a little bit of machine design, CAD, going to do some CAD videos. I have a free version of CAD on there, something called SketchUp, just so people can draw stuff, right? Because they don't know where to find it. Entrepreneurship. You know, business management, online entrepreneurship. If people join, I can tell them about that. Why? Because I've run a business for a long time. I'm not necessarily a professional at it. I'm not all that good at owning a business. Otherwise, I'd have a giant integration company like NTH or something. But I have learned a lot about it. I've learned about web design and online stuff, you know, created these sites. So I can help people with this. And sometimes that's part of what people need. This guy that owns the pet food supplement company, we've already talked about this, right? Some of this more business related stuff, product design, inventing stuff, right? Microprocessors. This is where people like Vlad could probably help me out, because he's done more of the Arduino and Raspberry Pi and microprocessor stuff. So I would love to turn this thing into a much bigger site that other people are involved with. Like I said, I'm not all that hipped up on creating lots more PLC videos. There's already people out there doing it. People like Vlad, there's a guy named Stephen Gates that does some very basic stuff, but they're good at it, right? And they've already got the stuff. I don't have the time to create more of this, but there's certain things that maybe only I can create. So I'm trying to do more of the things that I fit the best in at here. So that's what this is all about. And anybody who sees this a little bit later, this open house, this is a big part of my focus now. Why? Because COVID's hit, and I'm in this little house here, and I'm not getting the in-person training classes. So I need to find a way to present what I'm presenting. I'm still writing books. I'm doing another one that NTH is going to help fund on troubleshooting and things like that. But meanwhile, right, this site is kind of the center of what I'm doing. Other ongoing thing, this is kind of cool. Whoops. This is a feasibility study for a food processing plant. I did a whole webinar on this too. This is interesting. This is a guy in a freezer moving a 1,300-pound cart by hand. And they cannot get people fast enough to do this all day, right? It's hot in the summer, and they're pushing this stuff around in freezers. Crazy job. You would not want to do it. So they want to automate this whole plant, and they have 13 of these freezers. Big company. They're in Knoxville, which is near where Phil is, right? Near Knoxville, Tennessee. So this could turn into a very big job. I'm still ongoing. We're in feasibility. But for instance, Phil recommended a company called Elitech in Knoxville. And what's interesting about them is I went to school with Brandon Ellis, the owner of Elitech, who is a machine builder. So I went out and I met with him. I said, you know, I got this project here, and he showed me his place. He does training, he does robots, he does machine vision. And so he may get involved on this. Some of this other stuff, we're talking now about how do we segregate all these things out of these bins. So I did a whole video on this too. There's another webinar that's on this stuff. so this is an ongoing project also. So I'm still doing the integration. I'm still doing the training. I'm still going down to Miami. But meanwhile, this is now kind of what I'm focusing on. So this open house thing today was really a way for me to record what I'm working on and why I've kind of evolved into doing what I'm doing. A little bit of social proof there in my background in building custom machinery. But if people want to take individual classes, what's happening is these people, right, that are doing these classes, that's exactly what they're looking for. If they need PLC classes, if they really want a full TIA Portal class or something, Vlad, do you have TIA Portal or Siemens, or are you only Allen Bradley?
I'm only Allen Bradley at this point. You know, over my experience and the companies I've worked with, they all had Allen Bradley. We've actually taken out some Siemens stuff as well, but I hear that it's slowly growing in North America, and they're actually advertising quite a bit more now on the Siemens side. So we don't currently offer, but I'm sure that there's other providers that have those classes.
Right. So the Siemens stuff, as a matter of fact, I don't know very many other people that are doing Siemens. I think Sean Tierney's starting to get into Siemens. Tim Wilburn, I think he's doing all Allen Bradley too that I know of. I think he's put a couple Siemens out there. So I may keep providing some of that on my little Facebook group. I do a lot of TIA Portal 10-minute lessons. And I just keep evolving the project and building it up. It's pretty powerful stuff. This is like their version of ControlLogix, and it's easy to program. This is not any more difficult than ControlLogix is. And I consider ControlLogix easier than 500. For instance, people have to learn all the registers, and managing everything and designing a large project is hard with 500. But I did it for many years, right? The 500 was what was out there, man, or PLC 5s or whatever for years. So Kelly and I we go way back with that stuff. It's easy for us, but for somebody new and trying to explain how the heck am I going to take all these F registers and N registers and manage it, right? It's not basic programming that they need to learn. It's system design, right? It's managing all those registers and how do you organize them and how do you organize your program. And especially when you just have ladder 2 through ladder 500. Now you only have 255. So ladder 200 or whatever, right? If you're going to build a 500 project, it's going to be disorganized. You have no choice. You can't name you can't nest things, and you can't use all the AOI tools or any of that stuff. But yet people did it for years, right? That was a powerful platform for its time. And we built some really big stuff in the 90s and the 80s with PLC 5s and PLC 3s and, even projects.
I did a project for a guy a few years ago who was wanting to do 500 series. And I said, man, I'm begging you, please do 5,000. And I convinced him, and it was cost effective for him. So that's probably the reason he was convinced. And once he saw the flexibility of it, he's like, oh, wow, you can do all that. I said, yeah.
But the software, man, the licensing, the cost, the hardware, your 80 series now, those 80 series Logix PLCs are over $10,000 each.
Yeah. We were using Compact, so
yeah, Compact's great, and you can build a giant system with Compact. I'm starting to push the 1200 because the cost of the software is less. You don't have the licensing issues you do with Allen Bradley. So if you're an individual person and you're trying to build up your own stuff, I'd almost recommend Automation Direct or the 1200 for Siemens because it's just less expensive, for an individual person.
Well, he didn't have a choice because that was the vendor's choice.
North America, we are at least 70% Allen Bradley. So whether people like it or not, it is what it is, and that's what people are going to use. And I'm really good at it, and Kelly's really good at it. So, of course, we're going to teach that because that's what we've built all our machines on in the last, 30 years or whatever we've been doing this stuff.
I think, Frank, you made a really good point in the sense that I don't think that the platform is as important as understanding, the software and like PLC programming at its core, right? So it really, I think like people sometimes miss that point, but they want to focus on, let's say, learning Allen Bradley versus learning PLC programming and like machine design and integration. Just as an approach. And I think that's very important to recognize. Don't focus on a specific platform. There's going to be little differences, right? And in your user interface, but at the end of the day, you want to learn the fundamentals before you sort of fixate on a platform.
Exactly.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, it's about more your program organization, your system design. Sometimes, like when Kelly and I would do stuff for Mid-South or whatever, the system's already designed, right? Somebody built a machine ahead of time, and then you have to go in there and figure out, well, what is the best way I'm going to organize all these individual things in this machine into modules, right? And if it were a slick, you just don't have a lot of choice. I'm going to do this little part with ladder 12, or whatever. But with control logics, you have a lot more what you call things, how you organize things. So again, my book, right? This guy, I talk about that, right? I talk about program organization. I seem to be better at writing than I do at creating videos. So I'm doing a lot of writing, and then the writing sometimes becomes the videos. So that's kind of what's happening with NTH and some of I'm writing a troubleshooting and maintenance book right now. And it's because when I teach these classes, they really don't want to learn the programming. They don't want to write programs. They want to maintain systems, or they want to learn the fundamentals behind design of the systems. It's one or the other. It's rarely, I want to learn the instruction set. That honestly, you can learn online, right? You can learn the instruction set. I would say Vlad's stuff is probably mostly the instruction set. Here's a timer, here's a counter, here's all the math instructions, here's how you use them. The organization of it is a different thing. And troubleshooting is certainly a different thing. You can't troubleshoot without physical equipment. I'm going to write a book on it, but there's going to be a whole bunch of physical exercises behind it. And NTH, one of the good things about them is they have a lot of physical stuff. They have drives, they have, expensive machines that I can go up and videotape fixing things. So the writing part, it's going to take me a couple more months to write it up, but the video part, yeah, we'll do drives and robots and whatever they want to do, right? That'll become some of the videos. So anyway, what is this? I always kind of end my little meetings with this. What is Mastering the Machine? Well, I created a download, and this was actually based by the Wright Industries stuff. It was a step-by-step guide to planning, machine building, and documenting. So what are all the steps that it takes to plan a machine? How do machine builders quote it, right? What are all the documents that it takes to do this? What are timing diagrams, right? How do applications engineer put all this stuff together, right? So that's kind of what this document was about. I didn't know what it was for. It was called an opt-in incentive, and I would get people's emails and use it for marketing. But that's where the name came from. And then feedback from some of the guys. I'm surprised Seven is not here, Seven Matthews, but he was one of the guys that's currently a member at the Automation Academy that said, we're really here for your expertise and your background on machine building and systems integration. So that's where this came into. So what I thought about is he said, why don't you create a class on systems integration? And I said, well, there's a real problem with that. One is there's 50 different subjects within systems integration. PLCs are a little tiny part, then there's CAD, and there's 100 things. How do I organize something like that? So I'm kind of stuck right now. I did create a series, and I actually did this. This was the first module, right? I did the this preliminary feasibility study, and I said that's a good start, right? This is how you plan the machine ahead of time. Then I had Doug Allward on, and I said, here's how the big boys quote these systems. And this was a webinar. But my second module was going to be on the spreadsheets and the things that you use to promote, or not to promote. I'm actually looking at another little thing up here that's flashing at me. People are sending me messages. Maybe they can't get into the webinar. That's probably the messages. But anyway, so how do you quote stuff? How do you price it? How do you mitigate risk? And the webinar covered that, but I haven't even created my second module for this. But I have created this series. I plan on putting CAD, machine design, concepting of machines, concepting of systems. My dilemma now is I could create module 6, but I don't have module 2 done. In other words, I could talk about machine design But before I do machine design, I kind of got to do quoting, right? How do we quote? How do we step by step? That Mastering the Machine series needs to be a true course in order, right? Because people like the guys that I'm teaching right now, how do I price my system? How do I make my parts list? How do I draw my electrical drawings, right? That's what this series will be about. It'll be about all the things that it takes to design and build machinery, including quoting them. So I could do module 6 right now, but I don't have module 2 done. I've got module 1 done, feasibility study, right? So I'm not sure where to go with this. That's kind of my dilemma. So I was hoping that a bunch of people would log in. There must be a problem with the login because I'm getting a bunch of messages. Let me see. Zoom, hi, Frank. Zoom requires a password. I can't log in.
I didn't require one.
Well, it does not require a password, but the link may be wrong. So a bunch of people are saying that. Well, they're going to have to watch, unfortunately, just watch the replay. I don't know why, but yeah, that's what it says here. Hi, Frank. Zoom requires a password. I can't log in. Got a lot of messages popping up. So anyway, that's what this is going to become for the people who couldn't log in. I'm sorry. I don't think it took that. The next webinar is April 30th. Would love to have a guest. Dave Griffith would be a good choice. We've been talking back and forth. He was supposed to be here because he's an integrator of some kind. I don't know, but he does a lot of publicity stuff. So, and Vlad has a webinar with him regularly. I think it's called a podcast, not a webinar. A webcast, a podcast. But anyway, Dave's an interesting
terminology.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, and he's one of the guys I've got on my list. But he's an integrator. I know he goes into factories and he does consulting. What is his background, Vlad? What does he do?
To be honest with you, it's still a little bit of a mystery, but from my understanding, he is, like, as you said, a consultant, but he doesn't necessarily do the technical work. He just manages, the personnel around all of that. So he helps companies kind of digitally transform and manages everything around that. And so he's the interface, I would say, between multiple companies. So kind of like consultant, project manager. He also does like MES system implementation, and he kind of figures out what it's going to take to get it done.
Okay, he's interesting. Yeah, got a big beard. That's what he's probably famous for as far as seeing him. He's got an interesting presentation. But yeah, so he does that, and I'd love to talk to him about that because I'd like to see how he got into that. I'm just curious. So I have a guest, like I said, every one of these, every 2 weeks, and then May 14th is Tatsoft. So that's going to be cool. I know something about Tatsoft. There's a guy named John Sullivan that I've been dealing with. I met down in Florida, and he's doing some of the video recording and things like that for Tatsoft. And so anyway, that's what this is all about. It's kind of a presentation of my company and what I've been doing for the last several years. Any suggestions, of course, are taken. I'm already going too many different directions at once, and that's probably going to be some people's suggestion is don't go in so many directions at once. But time has guided me into the direction that I am right now. Kelly could tell you one of the reasons I got out of doing what Kelly does. It's very time consuming. You can make good money, but you can be working 7 days a week. And I did that for 10 years, and I really don't like it. I do not like working Saturday and Sunday every week. I don't like anything beyond, I'd say, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I turn into a pumpkin. I do not like working late at night. I love getting up early, but some of the guys want you to be there at midnight. And, I'm not good at that. So that's why I've evolved into the teaching probably as much as anything. Building machines is capital intensive. If I had it to do again, I would never have started a machine building company. I did it, like I said, for 10 years. It is not recommended. I would say, unless you're just funded by somebody, right? That is one of the most dangerous possible careers you can get into is building machinery. Now, systems integration, less so. At least you're not buying your customers' products other than control components, which are expensive, but nowhere near as expensive as machine parts, right? And hiring machinists and farming stuff out to machine shops or buying your own equipment. I hired a machinist, bought a lathe and an iron worker and a lathe and a mill and painting equipment to paint machinery. And, it was just crazy. You get 40% of your money up front, and then you scramble to get the second, to get the machine done in time. And during that time, you're not selling stuff. The other thing is that for those of you thinking of hiring people and doing this stuff, if you own and run a machine building company, you're not going to be doing the programming and the design as much. As my company grew, only I could sell, right? I'm the one who has to go meet the customer. If the program is going to get written, I'm going to have to hire somebody to do most of the programming. I'm going to have to hire somebody to do the mechanical design because I'm too busy doing other stuff. As the company grows, that's what you're doing. And you're delegating, it just doesn't work. Tom Nall, my mentor, he eventually sold his company. He still to this day, he loves flying. So he buys airplanes, kit airplanes and things, and he still flies for that company. He'll go out and sell and do service calls and things like that. But he no longer designs machines. He no longer builds machines. He doesn't turn wrenches. And I know he loves it. He was very good at it. He was very good at design, but he doesn't do any of that anymore. He just flies and sells for the company. And he doesn't own even a part of it, I don't think, anymore. They were bought, like a lot of these other machine builders, by a big conglomerate, Brown Machine. So they build a whole bunch of different stuff. But he did make a bunch of money from it. But yeah, so don't recommend that. If I had to do it again, like I said, I would have stayed in my garage longer. I don't think I would have. I loved building machines. It was cool. It was fun. But my company kind of imploded in 2006. I got a job that was, I called it the bite too big to chew. You can do 9 great jobs and lose it all on your 10th. And that's kind of what happened to me. It cost me $350,000 to build an $80,000 machine.
Man.
Yeah, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Frank, if I might throw in a question on that topic, what are your thoughts on data collection? It seems to be picking up quite a bit, with these platforms like Tatsoft, Ignition. And my thoughts are, I guess, what I'm trying to do myself is not go and become a traditional systems integrator, but focus a lot more on data and the opportunities there. And it seems to be in some aspect like a gold rush.
Yes.
But I was wondering what you see in those opportunities.
I think a lot of what's coming out now is a bunch of buzzwords. That's just and I'm an old guy, so I'm a grumpy old man, whatever. But I think a lot of what I see now, I've seen Walker Reynolds stuff, and he talks about unified namespace, and there's some buzzwords that go with that. You know what? Juan Pablo and I didn't invent anything new. But we have a unified namespace. We have one giant SQL database, and we gather everything. We don't use a data historian. We do everything within Ignition, and Juan Pablo knows where all that data is. And as he needs to deal with it, he writes his own code to do it. He's a SQL expert. The guy's in his early 30s, but he Googles things and he YouTubes things, and he learns how to do it that way. I don't think it's all that hard, and I don't think there's anything all that new. What has changed is software is less expensive. I don't have to buy RSView 32 and pay $100,000 for a $64,000 tag package anymore. I can get Ignition, and it's unlimited tags, right? So all the tools are there. But one of the things Walker mentioned is that that happens is you have this central SCADA package, and then you start hiring people to scab on their different parts of it. That is a problem, right? Before you know it, you have a mishmash of things, and no one in that plant. A plant doesn't have a technical expert usually. They may have an engineering manager or somebody that's a really smart technical guy or whatever, but they don't do it every day. Their job is to run the plant and do the automation stuff within that plant. So they rely on these integrators. And there's a lot of smart integrators out there. There's a guy who comes over here, and we talk about his little $2,500 Endosoft, which Endosoft is where Tatsoft came from. He has this little package that acquires data and logs it into SQL databases or whatever database you want. But if you really want something custom, everything's hourly, right? It's going to be, I don't know, $100 and some an hour for that guy to come in and do his thing. And then if he starts doing something different, you're going to have to get a different guy to come in and put together a different part. Your other option is to do what Walker Reynolds recommends. Go hire Intellic and they'll manage everything for you. But I don't think what he's doing is new. I think he's another systems integrator who has a package and the name and a bunch of names for things, right? But what he's doing is not, you know, MQTT. It's funny because I had to look up what is MQTT and why is it used. We don't have any of it at ABD. And we've thought about using it in a couple spots because we have these oddball little things like, you know, we have a 1950s era compressor with a 350 horsepower drive on it. There's no PLC on that thing. So we've got to bring data in from it. But why would I use MQTT if I have an Allen Bradley system and I can put a point IO block out there? Why would I use some other language, right? I got a bunch of control logics and I got a bunch of Siemens stuff, mostly. And I have some GE PLCs. So what do we do when we need to get data out of that? We use the Allen Bradley stuff and the Siemens stuff and the GE stuff, and we bring it all together in Ignition. We're using whatever hardware is best. Now, I'm fortunate because the owner of the company is the guy who is sort of the master systems integrator. I'm the expert on the PLCs, the floor hardware, the getting it to his Ignition, and I create prettier screens than he does, right? So I know how to do that. But he's the expert at the database and how to archive things and how to retrieve things and where to keep it. And we just talk. And that would be ideal in every plant, right? You'd have an expert that is a member of the plant. That's the guy you need to hook up with, right? But in your case, like you're wanting to get into that, you're going to provide a piece of that. But by yourself, you can't provide everything, right? You can't spend 2, 3, 5 years on one system. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. So that's why you're doing what you're doing. And I know a bunch of people who've done that. Brandon Ellis, Phil, is one of those at Elitech. He created a hardware piece. And his hardware piece he sells to Denso. And Denso, you know, it's a $20,000 box that collects data and sticks it into a computer and does whatever it does. He's pushing that. I looked at it and I was like, why would I buy that? You know, I just use the same things I've always used. I'd use, you know, I don't know, point IO things and bring it into a PLC and then bring the PLC into Ignition or something, right? I don't know why I would use his little box. So he hasn't sold me on it, but there's somebody who's created a physical product. It's cool looking. It looks like it's from outer space. It's this little block that, you know, does computer stuff. Phil, have you seen that? His little block?
Yeah. That's originally why I started talking to Brandon was that box kind of drew me in and I was curious about it and what its capabilities were.
Yeah. And I don't know the full capabilities, but if somebody told me I want to get a bunch of data and do stuff with it, I wouldn't do that little box, you know, and I come from a machine building and integration background. That's not what I would choose. You know, I would choose doing what I'm doing at ABD. Why? Because that's what I know. Would I call other people who are really smart about stuff like that? Sure. I would call Brandon and say, hey, can your little box do this? You know, and then I'd have to decide, is it warranted to pay 20 grand or whatever the heck his little box is to do the job that I'm doing? Or would I just put a little Micrologix 1400 in there and suck some data into it and then share it into a SCADA system and log it to a database or whatever? I'd ask other people because I'm not an expert at everything. So I don't know what to suggest there, except that I think there's space there for everybody to do everything. Your hard part is selling. So let's say, Vlad, you do create a little module that does something. Like I said, there's a guy here who does that. How can he afford to do that? Well, he knows Indasoft. He has built this little module that does what it does, but his advantage is he's a manufacturer's rep and he knows 100 plants. And so he gets into those plants, and that's his method of advertising. He's selling them gearboxes and sensors and whatever else. He's a manufacturer's rep. So he gets to go see all these people. And he says, by the way, I have this package that can pick up your data automatically. All you need to do is stick the tags in it, and it'll log it to a database. And his box does that for $2,500. But you know what? If you want to do something special, you're going to pay him for customization or somebody else for customization because he's busy. He's a sales guy, right? He's running around the country selling sensors and gearboxes and Endosoft. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think what I'm struggling with, you know, it's tying that back to maybe business opportunities, because I think that maybe just sucking in data into a database, it's like one step, but then in order to fund those projects, you really need to find use cases, right? And that's heavily dependent on the process, on the plant, what they're trying to do. And that's where, like, I feel the real challenge in the sales process is, because I think it's hard to sell just a data solution, but then what you really need is, like I said, like, to tie this back into savings. And I think there's a lot of discussion on even like these protocols, right? That I think MQTT was designed in the 1990s. So I'm not really sure why it's resurfacing, but I don't think it's as important as figuring out like, what are you actually doing? And no one really kind of puts forth those use cases, you know what I mean? And like, that's where I'm struggling with a little bit personally. So
I can provide all those you want. And Dave probably can too, because he's in those plants. I can tell you down at ABD, we have every kind of case. And I mentioned this, I put a blog post or something out on this the other day about here's an example. Okay. His fork truck drivers scan barcodes. And so they need a method of doing that remotely. So they use a little remote barcode. Okay. But they receive things from a truck, and the guy gets you can't even read it in the truck. So they got to unload it and they pull it out. And then all of a sudden they need to say, well, what is this? Okay. So they scan it. It could be anything from a solid that's a powder. It could be a barrel, right? It may have a barcode on it that can't be read, that got scraped in the shipping. But hopefully it's been ordered. Right. But that's the first fundamental thing. Was this ever even ordered by us? Sometimes they get stuff that maybe it's for the next door neighbors, whatever, but they have to pull it off the truck, and then they have to scan it. And right there, if it's not ordered, it's not even something that they're supposed to put into their process. I need to return it. I need to put it back on the truck and not waste any time with it. But how do you let the operator know he's out here and he's got a pad? Okay. But he can't carry a barcode reader and a pad. Now he can use the pad with a camera and he can maybe read a 2D barcode. Maybe he can even read a 1D barcode. But anyway, you need to let the guy know. So he uses these hand scanners anyway. So one of our very small tasks was, how do we let the guy know what the problem is? That this is either not our thing, or it's not in the list, or it just doesn't read. Well, the only thing we know how to do is vibrate it, and there's a little light on it. You can blink a red light. Okay, so pretty simple. That absolutely has to be tied into the database. You have to go into the database and say, was this ordered? What's it for? Where do I put it? This barrel is going into lot number such and such. We've been waiting for it, man. Get it over here as fast as possible. That can all go on the pad, right? But it can't. How do you carry a pad and a barcode reader at the same time, when you're a fork truck driver? What if you're a guy that just doesn't even know how to use this stuff? You don't know what the buzz in the handle means, so there's just a lot to this. So there's little videos we create, it all comes down to access to that one giant database that has everything from HR stuff and which employee is on duty, whose fork truck is this, how do I differentiate between this barcode reader and another barcode reader on the other side of the plant that is reading data in here also. Is he reading something that he's receiving off of a truck, or is he reading something that's a different barrel that's up in the warehouse in another building? So you have to track these things, right? That's the other thing. And is it this operator on this fork truck, or is it a different guy? So all this,
and there's a lot of layers in that too.
There are, and we're able to do all that. But the only reason it took me so long to just learn what the heck that plant does and how it does it, I had to learn the process, and then he's the expert on the database. And we talk a lot about it. I'm having to become an expert on things like the barcode readers and whatever, or Modbus or whatever he's doing in that plant. But why would I reinvent the wheel and create something new to do something if I already have a tool that does it, right? I'm going to propose the same tools I already know. Now, if you come up with a new tool, like Brandon's stuff, Brandon's got some new stuff. Okay. You know, his tools might be really cool tools, but how long is it going to take me to learn it? Juan Pablo's having the problem right now of justifying Tatsoft. Do I want to learn a new thing, even though it's less expensive and it might be cooler and it might do more? Or do I just want to upgrade the thing I already know how to use? You know, do I just upgrade ignition? Or do I go buy Wonderware, you know, now, which is called Aviva? You know, it's a whole new thing. I don't know. You know, they're always changing their branding. So I would just say, Vlad, if you come up with a cool thing, even if you I've come up with a lot of cool things. My hard part's been selling them. I'm not consistent. The online marketing is definitely the way to do it now, and I'm not consistent enough at even selling my own academy. So I think even if you come up with a really cool thing, you know, a data acquisition tool like Matthew has done here for Endosoft, now your job's going to have to be to go sell it, you know, or go do it. So you could say, I have this really cool method of doing things, and you could just go in and do integration jobs doing that thing, whatever that thing is. But it's still that now you're managing a business, and before you know it, you're trying to hire people and do this and that. I don't know if that's where you want to go. You know,
I've got many aspirations, you know, but
well, you're a young guy. I
realize the challenges, right?
You're a young guy. You've got you know, you've got aspirations and you got the time to do it. But you got any kids?
Not yet.
Not yet. That's good, right? Once you have kids and you start settling down, now all of a sudden the risk becomes greater. So going out and do you want to be gone all the time? Right. So I think Dave, for instance, travels around the country with his wife. That's pretty cool. And maybe his kids. I don't know if he's got kids. I've seen some.
I don't know if that lifestyle is for me, but it's pretty cool the way they do things. But I don't know if I could do the same thing as Dave. I think it's nice to travel. And like you've mentioned, I think it's really cool to see certain places, but there's also some caveats to that, right? Where
that's right.
A lot of these facilities are not located in the most pleasant areas. And so it becomes challenging then, you know, just sitting at a hotel for weeks at a time. But no, I mean, I think I'm still trying to evaluate the options, you know, and kind of weigh the pros and cons. It's a matter of, I think, also focusing on a certain thing, you know what I mean? Because if you go into, like you said, build a widget, or whether it is software or hardware, then you have to know how to sell, and that could take time and focus away from some other things. So it's figuring out the balance that is really challenging.
I don't know that it's that I don't know how to sell. I think I basically do know how to sell. I sold machines, I sold my own stuff or whatever. You have to be the evangelist for your own product, whatever the heck it is, and you have to believe in your own product. But, you know, the other thing I would say is, I invented that smart bench back in 2003, and I spent several years pushing that. I thought, you know, the way that thing came about, there was a company called TRW Koyo. They're out in East Tennessee, and they had these manual assembly stations, and they said, can you come in and rebuild our manual assembly stations? This is when I get into the machine building. And I said, you know, sure. You know, what all do you want done to them? So they said, well, we want this, this, and this, and retool things and reprogram it. We want to make it all automated. Okay. Hey, cool. Then they said, oh, by the way, we need to keep these in production. We have 17 of them. They're all different. And we need to keep them in production because we're making parts on them. So we want you to come in for 4 hours at night and do this. And then the next morning come in and during the downtime and do this and retool it and do all this stuff. And I said, well, you guys are an hour away from me. I've got to travel in to do this stuff or send one of my guys in and come out. By the time we were done, it was going to cost as much as a new machine to rebuild an old machine. You had all the stuff there. And so I said, okay, what if I build one machine that can replace any one of your 17 machines? And I will put that in your plant and pull your machine out, replace it with this. And all you have to do is program that machine to do whatever this machine did. But by the way, the tooling, right? All the tooling and stuff needs to be removable and replaceable. I said, I could do that for you. And they said, wow, that sounds like an interesting idea or whatever. Well, that's where I started building the smart bench. It took me, I don't know, 6 months to probably build it, design it. I thought the idea was great. So what I did, and I showed Kelly kind of some of how this worked, it had a screen where you could do a sequential set of operations of anything. And you pulled it up by function. And you could say, okay, my function is if this sensor is made, lock this little thing, right? And then go to the next step, and then sense whether this bolt went in, and sense whether you reached this part into this bin and pulled this part out, and now sense that it went into this location. So it's a manual assembly sequential thing. Well, all of a sudden I started getting crazy ideas, and I said, well, this does any sequential operation of any machine, right? So I built a little thing that played a keyboard. It would play notes, and it would run timers and things, and it was an automation direct PLC. I thought it was really cool. So I brought it to a couple trade shows, and I started trying to sell this thing, right? And I made marketing material for it and everything else. And what eventually happened was people would come to this thing and say, that's pretty cool, but we don't need one. What we do need is we need a machine that does this. And so I started landing machine building jobs because of that thing, but I sold none of them. I sold zero. TRW Koyo, I didn't bring any into there. By that time, their model year was up. They do automotive stuff, so their model had changed, and they just probably built new machines. You know, the guy that I did all that for, Lowell Milliken, moved on to a different company. So I don't know.
So it was a really good trade show machine.
It was.
Got people over to your booth and interested,
exactly.
Which is what you want for a trade show.
That's right.
But it didn't work out for the other.
That's right. So, and that's what NTH, for instance, does now. They bring a machine to their trade shows. Wright Industries did the same. They brought machines to their trade shows. Machines that didn't even necessarily do anything, or they were repurposed for trade shows or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes they do silly things like pour drinks for people or hit a golf ball or whatever.
Which is really cool, right? It's really cool. Yeah. But do I need a golf ball hitting machine? Probably not. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. I've done more than one trade show machine. It's like, we're doing this, really?
Yeah. So, well, anyway, gosh, we're well into the time here, and people didn't show up, and there might have been something wrong with the. So what I did on my link on the LinkedIn, I just copied the invitation. That's how everybody gets in. On the event, I didn't do the same thing. I had to just copy the link itself, because they don't allow you to post all the list of everything. They just say, what's the link? Well, I put that link in there, and it does not require a password. None of you had to type in a password for this, right? You just click and said go. Yeah. I don't know what the difference is, but that was my first attempt at a LinkedIn event thing. So I don't know. But something must have gone wrong, because there were people trying to get in and do their thing. So I'll post that we all met, and we all talked and hung out at my virtual open house, and I talked about what I did, and they can log in and look if they want to, but I don't know how many people really look. I put it on YouTube and whatever. It's part of my advertising thing, right? Trying to get people to join. I still recommend, Phil's been a loyal member here for a while, but I try to get people to join, just because there's a whole ton of stuff you can download, and especially students of mine, try to teach the classes, teach somebody how to do whatever the heck it is. And then there's a reason to join, because they download all the stuff, and they get the free software, and they get I can tell them, hey man, WineView, that's my, I didn't make WineView or whatever, but I definitely promote it, because, ABD's full of it. It's great stuff, and $200 color HMI, man, cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what this stuff's all about. Just telling, pushing my own product and kind of trying to sell it. I'm new to the whole promoting myself thing, online. I've been doing this for about a year, maybe, and it's hard, right? It's LinkedIn and things like that. Vlad, you've been doing it for longer, and you haven't been doing it on LinkedIn. You've been selling Solus PLC. I don't know how you do that. Did you just do Google AdWords or something, or?
To be honest with you, it built up organically, but I wrote for quite a while, just like you have been with your blog, and Udemy has played an important role as well, right? So at the very beginning, where there was just like Paul Lynn with his only course, I had posted quite a few things to Udemy, and that kind of picked up, and I managed to redirect some of the traffic to Solus PLC. So yeah, I would say, organic, just writing blog posts, and then YouTube has been pretty good too, right? So And I think like YouTube algorithms, like even our webinars with Dave don't rank really well on YouTube. And I think, you know, they kind of fall off the algorithm, but targeting like very specific things that people type in, like obviously, you know, the beginner PLC programming, like that gets quite a few clicks and what have you. But yeah, I think like one thing I would maybe recommend based on this, I'm not sure why people couldn't log in, but I think we use an app called Restream, and that allows you to kind of send, you know, whatever you're doing in Zoom to like LinkedIn, Facebook, and like YouTube and other platforms. So then people can see from there and also like comment on those. Like that has been pretty successful for us.
The only thing is that's only chat that I've seen. You can't participate like we're doing unless you're a guest host.
Yeah, well, I mean, like you could have a few people in here, like your host or whoever's coming in, and then yeah, obviously, like there's some pluses and minuses, you know, to everything, but I think it still promotes. Like I guess now you're gonna post this to YouTube, but then people could also see it on LinkedIn, and if you know they want to pop in and out without being on camera, I think that's a good way.
That's true too.
But
yeah, I'm still, like I said, I kind of concepted doing this, did my first one in August, and then did my first official one in November, and I'm kind of winging it. But my purpose mostly is the recorded version, and I don't care as much about YouTube. YouTube itself, yeah, I got a bunch of followers on my channel, not a bunch, but you know, some, and they seem to religiously go watch those things. But it's a method more of, like, for instance, hey, showing what I'm doing, I can repurpose this stuff. I can chop this little end piece off, for instance, and just say, hey, here's a four-way conversation between us on systems integration, which is cool too. So it all becomes content. And
I need to become better at that. That's, you know, a challenge that I always tell myself I'm going to like re-chop things, and I never get to it. There's just, you know, so much things that you can be doing. So like content, it's a challenge, like you've mentioned a couple of times.
That's what I'm finding. I'm really good at that. I can create just tons and tons between written and video stuff. However, the professionally done stuff, like the videos that you've done, they just take so long to formally do those. And you know,
yeah. I wouldn't even call, I guess, our stuff as professional as, I don't know if you watched the Real Pars videos, but they've got like full teams of, you know, like designers and like video producers, and, you know, they take a really long time to probably do almost like frame by frame design. I can't do that either. I'm kind of in between, you know, what you mentioned. I wouldn't call it totally professional, but it still takes a lot of time.
That's what I did on the first video. The RS Logix 500 video was that way. It had a little music, and it had some moving arrows and text and a lot of things. It just took so long that I decided, you know, I can't, like Control Logix, that's twice as much. And if it took me 250 hours to do, you know, RS Logix 500, it's going to take me 500 hours to do professional Control Logix. That's a quarter of a year, all my time. I can't do that. So I've given up. And what I'm hoping to do, I'm hoping of making this a central place, and I can promote things like your Solus PLC. You want to go take a good thing? Here's a sample of it. Go watch Vlad's stuff. You know,
I appreciate it.
Now, how do I pitch it from here? It doesn't hurt me to do that. So Tatsoft, promoting Tatsoft doesn't hurt me to do that, and it may gain me some people that just say, "Hey, man, you got a lot of stuff in there." You know, so I linked to Walker Reynolds thing, you know, Industry 4.0, because he could explain what the heck it was. You know, I didn't know what Industry 4.0 was, and I finally figured out it's as much a buzzword as anything. None of this.
I mean,
stuff,
I think he might be the only person who can really explain it. So
I know exactly what it is now, you know. But I talked to John Sullivan. I met with John Sullivan down in Tampa, and we had breakfast together, and now I know what it is. He explained all that. He knows Walker. He knows the ignition guys, and I kind of get it. But the technology didn't suddenly become something else. It's been evolving, and it's changing, and some of these things are new words for the same things. But the goal is still what you said: presenting your use case for X. Right? Why do I want to collect this data? How do I want to take these different types of data, chug it, and give me some meaningful information? It's taken us 5-6 years to get stuff from the beginning of the line, which is how much water and juice are we using in these giant tanks, to the palletizers on the end of the line after everything's in boxes and everything's in, man, there's been all kinds of challenges with that, right? We're going from, we don't even know when the product, I told you about when the tank switched, right? I don't know really which tank's juice went into the box. I have a good guess, but I don't know where, when it goes through the pasteurizers and it finally transitioned from one tank to the other. It's pretty seamless, and I have to guess. But that was one of the tasks. Hey, is this from tank 1 or tank 2 or tank 1 or tank 2? They switch back and forth and they alternate. And if somebody gets, you know, I don't know what would happen, bacteria or something from something, which tank did it come from? You know,
right.
Goes through a pasteurizer. I don't think there's any bacteria, but you know, but yeah, there's been all kind of challenges. So you just do the jobs, and then you use what you know, right? That's something Doug Allward mentioned. He said, leverage your toolbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you've done in the past, that's what you use. You use your tools to solve problems. Yep.
Frank, appreciate everything.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it too, guys. It's the old home club here. I kind of know all you guys. Never met Vlad or Phil in person, but man, we've talked a bunch now online, and Kelly and I go back. We've met in person in pre-pandemic, shook hands.
It's weird how we've ended up in the same places more than once.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Kelly helped me, like I said, unload the Smart Bench in 2006 before he left Wright Industries. Then we run into each other at Mid-South working on jobs. He's working on one machine. I'm working on another. He walks from all the way in the different room. Hey, man, I heard you're here, whatever. And we all know the same people, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down now. And
all righty.
I guess apologize to everybody on LinkedIn for them not being able to get in. Like I said, I don't know the difference between that link and this link. It's the same thing, but people weren't able to get there. So I'll just say, well, go watch the video. We all talked, and we even talked about why LinkedIn links don't work a little bit. So we'll solve it.
Thanks again, Frank.
Well, thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Yeah. Take care.